Welcome, Marie.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So I have been hearing so much about Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, for years and years, and 2020 was always the date that we were working towards. And here we are in 2020. Can you give me an update of where we are with SDGs?
Sure. So the SDGs were launched 5 years ago. So
Mary's on 2, my bad.
5 years into it, 10 years to go. So the fire is on. We need to kind of keep pressing.
I think it's fair to say that the Compact worked with more than 10,000 businesses, and what we do see is a strong interest picking up on the corporate side, but also, fair to say that on a lot of the SDGs, we're not there yet. So we're really pushing hard, and I think obviously, the bigger context on climate in particular is there at the heart of our considerations.
I was able to attend a couple of the sessions here at the event on the SDG sort of philosophy, and it seems like we're getting beyond the mapping and alignment phase into a phase where people might start taking action. Do you feel confident that we're about to hit that tipping point?
Absolutely. I think the big issue, and one thing to remember for our audience here today, is the actual gap that we're looking at in terms of financing gap. We're facing about a gap of $3 trillion if we want to achieve those SDGs. So one thing that we are doing to actually mobilize the corporates and the businesses around that is for them to start investing with an SDG lens towards projects, or actually aligning the business strategy with SDGs in mind. So really shifting from an awareness to an actual implementation.
You mentioned about the role of the private sector in achieving SDGs. What should the private sector be doing? What's the role of the private sector, and where should they be doing more?
Obviously, we're here to call for them to do more, absolutely, and they have a key role to play as stewards and as investors themselves. So every company, we consider every company as investors, and we're here to call specifically on CFOs to engage, further going forward on those issues.
So we have been hearing so much about the increase of the role of investors in addressing climate change. You just mentioned that there's this giant gap in reaching our SDGs. Can you help put into context what it means for investors to really be a pushing force now for achieving SDGs?
Sure. So, we had Mindy this morning talking about the importance of rallying investors around this particular issue. The role that investors can play is fundamental, because they're here to actually creating a level playing field for companies, and for that we also need to have companies talking to investors more and more, and that's why we're calling on CFOs to play that role going forward.
Do you feel like, one of the things I also heard was that there is a lot of money out there in the form of aid, and helping turn that money towards a different purpose, and not necessarily having it be aid, but having it be an incentive, an impetus. Do you feel like that? What are the numbers that we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. We're talking about, I've mentioned the $3 trillion gap on one hand. Out of that, we're looking at probably about 150 billion actually complemented by the public sector. So there's still a huge gap. And the issue, well, not the issue, but one of the challenges that we're going to be facing is that aid money in particular will be released by government is often to kind of respond to emergency situations. So it's a very short-term response, whereas what we're looking at is actually transformational change through businesses.
How would you advise a company beginning to look at the SDGs as a lens for innovation? Like, are there advice, tips you could give them to having that conversation with the people outside the sustainability team?
Sure. So first of all, we've just launched a new tool called the SDG Action Manager as of last week. So we're hoping that this will really help companies at least creating a baseline and understand where they are in terms of the SDGs. And then after that, it's kind of, as we've said earlier in the conference, engaging stakeholders and ensuring that you pull some of the tipping points going forward.
Well, Marie Morice, thank you so much for joining us here at
My
Sidebar.
pleasure.